There exists a peculiar paradox in the architecture of human dominance. The individuals who announce their power most forcefully are often those closest to losing it. Watch any room where true authority resides, and you will notice something unsettling. The person speaking loudest, demanding attention, broadcasting their achievements with theatrical precision. This person is rarely the one others genuinely respect. They may command immediate attention through sheer volume, but beneath the surface, something more dangerous is occurring. Resentment is accumulating. Alliances are quietly forming against them. Their very display of confidence has become the mechanism of their undoing. This is not a moral judgment, but an observable pattern throughout history. Exaggerated confidence functions as a social alarm system, triggering defensive responses in everyone forced to witness it. The loud individual believes they are establishing dominance. What they are actually doing is painting a target on themselves that every ambitious rival, every threatened peer, every envious observer will eventually aim for. The question is not whether this backlash will come, but when and from which direction. Consider the trajectory of Benito Mussolini in the final years of his rule. Here was a man who had built an entire political identity around theatrical displays of strength. The jutting chin, the bombastic speeches delivered from balconies, the constant assertion of infallibility. For years, this performance worked. It intimidated opponents and rallied supporters who mistook volume for conviction. But by 1943, as military defeats mounted, something shifted in the calculus of Italian political elites. The same generals and party officials who had once applauded his grandiose declarations began meeting in shadowed rooms, discussing alternatives. They had grown exhausted by the performance, irritated by the disconnect between his proclaimed invincibility and observable reality. When the Grand Council of Fascism finally voted to remove him from power, it was not a sudden betrayal, but the culmination of years of accumulated resentment toward his relentless self-aggrandizement. His loud confidence had created the very conditions for conspiracy. Each exaggerated claim had been a small insult to the intelligence of those around him, and they had been keeping count. The lesson here extends beyond fascist dictators. In any hierarchy where others possess agency, excessive displays of confidence create a gravitational pull toward your destruction. You're teaching people that you view them as an audience rather than as agents, and they will respond accordingly. The psychological mechanism underlying this pattern operates at a level more fundamental than culture or circumstance. Human beings possess finely calibrated threat detection systems designed to identify challenges to their status within social hierarchies. When someone broadcasts confidence too loudly, too consistently, they trigger this detection system in everyone around them. The display is interpreted, usually correctly, as a dominance claim, an assertion that the loud individual sits above others in the social order. This creates an immediate problem. It forces everyone else to either accept subordinate status or contest the claim. Most people will not openly contest in the moment, because direct confrontation carries risk. Instead, they file the interaction away as evidence of your arrogance, your overreach, your fundamental unreliability. They begin the subtle work of social undermining, withholding information, declining to advocate for you in private discussions, forming alternative coalitions. This is not conscious malice in most cases. It is automatic status defense. The truly insidious aspect is that loud confidence often stems from internal fragility rather than strength. Psychologically secure individuals do not require constant external validation of their capabilities. They have internalized their competence and feel no compulsion to announce it repeatedly. Loud confidence functions as overcompensation, a psychological fortification built to protect against inner doubt. Others sense this, even if they cannot articulate it. The performance feels hollow because it is hollow, and that hollowness generates distrust. When you encounter someone who cannot stop talking about their achievements, your instinct correctly identifies this as a warning sign. Truly dangerous competitors do not announce themselves. They simply operate, and you discover their competence through consequences rather than claims. This is why quiet confidence carries such disproportionate weight in social dynamics. It suggests internalized certainty rather than desperate external validation seeking. The person who speaks sparingly but with precision, who lets their work establish their status rather than their words, is signaling something fundamentally different. They do not need your approval to know their worth, which paradoxically makes you far more likely to grant them respect. There is also a neurological dimension to this dynamic that deserves examination. Human brains are pattern recognition machines, constantly assessing congruence between claims and evidence. When someone's verbal assertions consistently outpace their demonstrated results, a cognitive dissonance alarm activates in observers. The brain registers this mismatch and codes the individual as potentially deceptive or self-deluded, neither of which inspires trust or followership. This assessment happens largely below conscious awareness, which is why people often report feeling inexplicably uncomfortable around the loudly confident without being able to identify exactly why. The discomfort is your pattern recognition system warning you that the performance does not match the underlying reality. Conversely, when someone's confidence aligns precisely with their demonstrated competence, neither inflated nor deflated, the brain registers congruence and relaxes into trust. This is the neurological foundation of credibility, and it cannot be faked through volume or repetition. In contemporary organizational settings, this dynamic plays out with brutal consistency. Consider the corporate environment where a new manager arrives and immediately begins asserting their authority through loud proclamations of their vision, their past successes, their revolutionary approach to leadership. They dominate meetings, interrupt subordinates to showcase their expertise, and ensure every conversation somehow circles back to their accomplishments. What they fail to notice is the progressive withdrawal occurring around them. Their team stops offering genuine ideas, instead providing only safe, expected contributions. Information flow becomes restricted as people stop trusting them with sensitive details. In private conversations and after-hours gatherings they are conspicuously not invited to. Their name becomes shorthand for everything wrong with management. Meanwhile, down the hall, a quieter leader operates differently. They ask more questions than they answer. They publicly credit their team's work. When they do speak, the room actually listens because scarcity has created value. Within 6 months, the quiet leader has built genuine loyalty and informal authority that extends far beyond their official title, while the loud manager is managing a team that has mastered the art of malicious compliance, following instructions with technical precision while ensuring outcomes quietly disappoint. This pattern extends into entrepreneurial spaces with equal force. The startup founder who cannot stop broadcasting their inevitable success, who treats every networking event as a personal stage, who shares inflated metrics and exaggerated partnerships, creates a specific type of vulnerability. Investors begin to question whether the confidence is warranted or compensatory. Potential partners grow suspicious of the disconnect between claims and observable traction. Competitors pay close attention, noting weaknesses hidden beneath the bravado. Most damagingly, early employees become cynical, recognizing that the founder is more invested in the performance of success than the difficult work of actually building something sustainable. They start seeking other opportunities while still collecting their paychecks, giving just enough effort to avoid confrontation, but withholding the discretionary commitment that separates thriving companies from collapsing ones. The founder, insulated by their own noise, often does not notice the erosion until it has become irreversible. By the time the performance can no longer be sustained, the organizational foundation has already crumbled beneath them. The social and romantic domains reveal these dynamics with particular clarity because the stakes feel more personal and the feedback is more immediate. In group social settings, the person who dominates conversation, who turns every topic into an opportunity for self-promotion, who performs confidence through volume and persistence, typically experiences a predictable arc. Initially, They may attract attention simply through force of presence. But watch what happens over repeated interactions. Others begin timing their arrivals to avoid extended one-on-one time with them. Invitations become less frequent. The social network gradually routes around them, forming tighter bonds precisely through shared recognition of this person's exhausting self-regard. In dating contexts, loud confidence might generate initial attraction through perceived status, but it rarely survives extended exposure. The performance becomes transparent, and what seemed like attractive certainty reveals itself as fragile ego maintenance. People seeking actual partnership recognize that they would be perpetually cast in a supporting role, existing to reflect someone else's self-image rather than being genuinely seen. The loudly confident person ends up with a dating life characterized by short-term successes and long-term failure, never quite understanding why relationships consistently fail to deepen. There are identifiable patterns that distinguish genuine confidence from its loud counterfeit, and learning to recognize these signals offers strategic advantage. Genuine confidence tolerates disagreement because it is not dependent on unanimous validation. The quietly confident individual can hear criticism, consider it, and integrate useful elements without experiencing it as an existential threat. They can say, "I don't know," or "I was wrong about that," because their self-worth is not staked on performing infallibility. Loud confidence, by contrast, cannot tolerate challenge. It responds to disagreement with escalation, with counterattack, with reframing the challenge as personal betrayal. This defensive rigidity is a signal that the confidence is performance rather than substance. Similarly, genuine confidence does not require constant verbal reinforcement. The person who mentions their achievements once, or not at all, trusting that competence will become visible through outcomes, is demonstrating internalized security. The person who cannot let a conversation pass without inserting reminders of their status, their accomplishments, their superiority, is revealing that they require continuous external validation to maintain their self-concept. They are trapped in an exhausting cycle of performance and validation seeking that others find both transparent and repellent. Watch how they react to other successes. Genuine confidence can celebrate others without feeling diminished, while loud confidence treats every peer achievement as a threat requiring immediate counterassertion. Another revealing pattern appears in how individuals handle silence and empty space in conversation. Those operating from genuine confidence are comfortable with pauses, with letting others speak, with occupying positions of observation rather than constant commentary. They understand that listening provides strategic information while speaking depletes it. The loudly confident cannot tolerate conversational silence because it feels like loss of control, like relinquishing the stage. They fill every gap with noise, mistaking constant verbal output for engagement and value creation. This compulsion reveals the performance anxiety underneath the confident exterior. True authority needs no such constant reinforcement. The use of humor also differentiates these two forms of confidence in telling ways. Quiet confidence can laugh at itself, can use self-deprecating humor without it reading as weakness, because the foundation is secure enough to withstand temporary status lowering for social bonding purposes. Loud confidence uses humor as a weapon, always punching down, always at others' expense, always reinforcing their claimed superiority. This aggressive humor style signals insecurity to everyone present, even as the person deploying it believes they are demonstrating dominance. The inability to be vulnerable, even in jest, marks them as fragile, and fragility is the opposite of what they are attempting to project. The strategic response to understanding this dynamic is not to eliminate confidence, but to recalibrate its expression. Powerful individuals throughout history have understood that true authority whispers while weakness shouts. They cultivate emotional restraint, speaking less frequently, but with greater precision. When they do assert themselves, the contrast with their usual reserve gives their words disproportionate weight. They master the art of strategic humility, acknowledging limitations not as weakness, but as honesty, which paradoxically increases rather than decreases their credibility. They understand that letting results speak creates more lasting status than self-promotion ever could, because status granted by others based on observed competence is far more stable than status you must constantly assert and defend. This approach requires patience that many lack. It means tolerating periods where your contributions go unrecognized, trusting that pattern recognition eventually works in your favor. It means watching less competent but louder individuals receive short-term rewards while you build long-term position. It means resisting the immediate gratification of public dominance displays in favor of accumulating genuine power through reliability, competence, and strategic relationship building. The loudly confident individual receives immediate attention. The quietly confident individual receives lasting loyalty, which is infinitely more valuable in any sustained competition. There is also the critical skill of avoiding unnecessary provocation. Every time you assert dominance loudly, you create enemies you did not need to create. Some battles are worth fighting, but most daily interactions are not battlefields requiring conquest. The person who treats every conversation as an opportunity to establish superiority exhausts themselves and everyone around them. They accumulate opposition as a natural consequence of their approach, building up resistance that will eventually manifest in coordinated form. Strategic operators understand that preserving optionality and goodwill costs nothing but returns everything. They can be formidable when necessary while remaining unremarkable the rest of the time, which means when they do act decisively, they face less organized resistance because they have not spent years teaching everyone to oppose them reflexively. Consider how this plays out in political environments, where coalition building determines survival. The legislator who constantly grandstands, who turns every committee meeting into a personal showcase, who claims credit for every minor victory, quickly becomes isolated. Their colleagues learn they cannot be trusted in collaborative efforts because they will inevitably attempt to monopolize recognition. When critical votes arise, when favors need calling in, when true influence must be exercised, they discover their loud confidence has purchased them visibility but not power. Meanwhile, the quieter colleague who has spent years doing unglamorous committee work, building genuine relationships, helping others advance their priorities without demanding public credit, has accumulated a network of genuine obligation and respect. When they need support, it materializes because they have made deposits in social capital rather than withdrawals. The ultimate paradox becomes clear when you observe power in its mature forms. The individuals who actually control outcomes, who shape decisions, who command genuine rather than performed respect, are almost never the loudest people in any room. They are the ones others instinctively look to when difficult questions arise, not because they have demanded this attention, but because they have earned it through demonstrated reliability and competence. Their confidence is so thoroughly internalized that it requires no external performance. They can afford to listen more than they speak because they are not desperately constructing an image, but simply operating from secure internal ground. The loud individual, for all their noise, typically controls very little. They are trapped in a performance they cannot abandon without admitting the fraud, surrounded by people who have learned to smile and nod while privately working around them. They mistake attention for respect, visibility for power, volume for authority. And by the time they recognize the distinction, they are usually already in decline, wondering why the alliances they thought they had built have evaporated, why the loyalty they believed they commanded was always conditional and shallow. The strategic lesson is ancient but perpetually relevant. Sustainable power accumulates in silence. Every word you do not speak is potential energy preserved. Every moment you resist the urge to assert yourself unnecessarily is credibility banked for when assertion becomes necessary. The discipline of quiet confidence is not weakness or passivity. It is the recognition that true authority does not require constant announcement, and that those who understand this will inevitably outlast those who do not. In the end, the person who needed everyone to know they were powerful was never powerful at all. They were simply loud. And history is littered with the wreckage of those who could not learn the difference.